In this session, let's focus on the demand and supply analysis specific to a consumer demand. So, from the consumer's perspective, if I have to look at the first important thing that comes is a consumer choice theory. What it clearly says is how the consumer will choose in terms of making decisions. How does the consumer behavior based on the preferences for various alternatives come out with? Because every time the consumer is faced with a good set of alternatives of goods and services, now how does the consumer really make a decision with respect to what bundle of goods and services he has to consume? So that is what is the factor that is driving the consumer decision. And the consumer choice theory always talks in terms of what is the kind of satisfaction each bundle of goods and services provide. So he is going to typically go with that particular bundle of goods and services that maximize the satisfaction of the consumer. And that is where we are saying consumer always selects that particular bundle of goods and services which maximize his utility, maximize his satisfaction. And that is what we are calling as the utility theory, typically covering the consumers, how the consumer will really behave based on the various choices that are available, right? So how does he really look at in terms of satisfaction that is provided by each of the bundles? So any bundle of goods, typically the one that gives the maximum compared to the other is similar, is simply prepared, that is preferred. That is the reason we call it as a good. But the more of it, keeping other things equal, the more of it I prefer more of it, right? All other things being the same, more is always preferred to the less. That is the reason we call it as a good, and that is what we typically define as the non-satiation condition. So we always look at, from any utility theorem perspective, we are talking about the various variables that are linking the quantities to be consumed, where we are simply saying holding all the other quantities constant, increasing the utilization of the one should result in more and more satisfaction. So more of it is always preferred compared to less of it. That is what we call as a good. But wherever I am preferring less of it compared to more, it is typically a bad. Typically, when we look at the garbage, we want the less of it but not more of it. We generally pay for getting less of it compared to more of it. So that is one of the important things. So consumer choice theory simply is relating how a consumer is making his buying, selling, buying decisions on the basis of that combination of goods and services that are maximizing his overall utility, right? Then one other important thing that we really need to look at in this context is the indifference curves. Whenever we are talking about, okay, better let's look at it in terms of two goods X and Y, right? So the customer probably this many units of Y and 0 units of X, or probably some units of X but some units of Y. So probably I can say any combination of these goods X and Y, any combination of this goods X and Y, the consumer is really indifferent. So he is okay having these many units of Y and these many units of X, or even he is okay having these many units of X and these many units of Y. He is having equal level of satisfaction with any of the combinations of X and Y along this curve. But of course, anything above it like this, he is much more preferred. He prefers them much more because they give him much more better satisfaction, whereas any curve like this, he gives less satisfaction to the. But yes, forget about the customer. From any customer's perspective, a combination of this much of y and this much of x, this much of y, this much of x, both of them will give equal amounts of satisfaction. Probably one customer may find this curve much more appropriate to him, some may prefer this may be more appropriate. We'll look at that part. But whenever I'm talking about the indifference curve, the intention is simple. Any combination of two goods, if I'm taking that particular combinations, that particular possible combinations where the customer is completely indifferent, we call those kind of curves as indifference curves. So any curve that is above it, it is much more preferred. Any curve that is below it, it is less preferred, because from the satisfaction perspective, the curve that is above it provides much more better satisfaction to the customer compared to the curves that are lesser or that are towards the left of it. And on that particular curve, any combination of x and y, they are given equal preference. But here, of course, there is nothing that is talked about in terms of affordability. We are not bringing the dimension of affordability in terms of the indifference curve definition. We are only looking at that particular combination which gives higher levels of satisfaction compared to the other. Right? So when I bring in the affordability item is what is called as the budget constraint. There is a constraint from a budget perspective which talks about combining the utility with the salary levels. Probably this gives me the best possible satisfaction, but this is unaffordable. It is beyond my budget. If I have to buy these many units of Y and these many units of X, it may be completely unaffordable for me. So that is coming through the budget constraint. But when I look at indifference curve alone, the budget constraint is not coming into picture. It is only talking about those particular goods and services which give equal preference along the curve. And what we generally observe is the indifference curves are always parallel to each other. They are they are always downward sloping. Right, one important principle we could see that they are always downward sloping. They always are parallel and they do not cross each other. Right, because if they are crossing, then it means probably you can look at it like this. If this is one indifference curve, this is one. This says okay, satisfaction for these many units of x and these many units of y is same as satisfaction of these many units of x and these many units of y. But on the other side, it's also saying these many units of x, right? These many units of x and these many units of y, the satisfaction levels are higher. It need not be the case. For some cases, satisfaction levels could be lower. Some cases, satisfaction levels could be higher, which means they are not providing the equal levels of satisfaction. So to prove that they provide equal levels of satisfaction, they need to be parallel to each other and they cannot cross each other. So we can very well say that they cannot cross, and if they are crossing, then the logical consistency cannot exist, which means they are not transient. So we need the indifference curves to be transient, logically consistent, which means they cannot cross each other. And in general, they have to be downward sloping itself. And we also see that the indifference curves are convex towards the origin. The indifference curves are convex towards the origin. and they cannot cross each other, and they show a diminishing marginal rate of substitution, which is what will be verified through the convex nature of them. What is this marginal rate of substitution being diminishing? The percentage change here is much lesser compared to the percentage change here, right? So that is where we are showing a diminishing marginal rate of substitution, which is another way of talking that they exhibit convex towards the origin kind of a behavior. So wherever we are talking about the opportunity set, especially from an investment perspective, all those combinations of goods that are affordable. So probably this set could be an affordable bundle, this could be an affordable, but this one may not be an affordable set at all. So those particular items on the indifference curve which are affordable, they are the ones that are representing the opportunity set. So using the opportunity set and looking at the indifference curves. So these are, let's say, the possible indifference curves. These are the possible indifference curves. And let's say I have a budget constraint. The budget constraint simply is that particular line. Let's say, okay, let's say this is good Y, this is good X. Good Y is $20 a good X is $20 a unit, good Y is $100 a unit. And let's say my salaries right now is let's say my salary is $500. So either I can buy 5 units of good Y and 0 units of good X, or I can buy 25 units of good X and 0 units of good Y. So I will try to draw that particular line, which is what I call as the budget constraint line. So this is my budget constraint line, which is the joining of number of units of X and Y I can afford with the salary. Now this budget constraint, that particular combination of X and Y which I can afford. This indifference curve is that combination of X and Y which gives similar levels of satisfaction whether I afford them or I may not be able to afford them. But when I talk about the budget constraint, I'm talking about that particular combinations of goods and services which will eat up the entire income. So this is the budget line, and the slope of it is completely talking about the relative price of these goods, because this is 100, this is 20. The slope of it will be talking about with respect to this is at the max 5 is affordable, whereas here 25 is affordable. So the slope of it comes out as 1 by 5. So this is the relative price, and now if you see anything that is above it, any line or any point that is above the budget constraint, it goes as unaffordable, and anything below this is completely affordable. So the budget constraint is directly talking about that particular cutoff which will indicate the affordable versus unaffordable goods and services. Anything above is unaffordable, below is affordable. Now I can combine these two, the budget constraint line and the indifference curves, because now the opportunity sets are those kind of goods and services which are affordable. So now if I have to combine the budget constraint with the affordable set of opportunity set of bundles, I'll see that particular combination where my budget line is exactly tangent to the highest possible indifference curve. Right, this is where I'm talking about the highest possible indifference curve. Let's say I have a budget constraint like this, I have one indifference curve like this, another parallel indifference curve like this, another parallel indifference curve like this. Now, in this indifference curve, okay, this is an affordable bundle, this is an affordable bundle. But here, if you see these points, they are affordable but typically less preferred. Whereas this is having a higher utility levels, but at the same time, it is affordable. So, this particular point will become that combination of X and Y that this particular customer needs to get in, because one compared to the indifference curve that is below it, it is providing a maximum satisfaction, and at the same time it is affordable because budget constraint is almost touching that particular. So it is satisfying both the properties. That particular highest indifference curve, which is a tangent to the budget line, that is what is provided as the combination that is much more satisfactory as well as affordable. So the consumer's equilibrium bundle using the utility analysis is that particular bundle, right? So any indifference curve that is above it, it is purely unaffordable. Any indifference curve that is below that or within this budget line, though it is affordable, the customer may not prefer it because it may not give that levels of satisfaction desired. It is less preferred compared to the other bundles, right? Now, one more important thing that we really need to see is the substitution effect as well as the income effect. See, let's try to understand this. Okay, let's assume that good X, good Y, the price of the good X is reduced, right? Good X, let's say the price is reduced. Now, what could very well happen? The person could buy more and more units of good X, keeping Y. Probably see anything on this bundle gives him the same levels of satisfaction. So earlier when he was buying, let's say this particular combination, now he'll try to have more and more units of good X, and because the price of it has gone down, he'll try to go to a kind of a location where he will go for more units of X and try to reduce the number of units of Y, right? Because it gives him the same level of satisfaction. And so which means there is a shift in the consumption towards the larger quantity of a good and reduce the consumption of Y, which is a lesser. But because of that, what is happening? Because X price has actually gone down, he is able to save some amount, right? Though he is purchasing more units of X and less units of Y, because X is becoming much cheaper, he is able to save additional dollars, right? First of all, his shift, because of a price decrease, his shift towards more and more units of good X and less units of good Y is called as the substitution effect. But in some cases, that substitution could very well lead to an income effect as well, because he is able to save money, which means his income is typically growing. Because of the decrease in the price, he is able to buy, he is going for buying more of X, buying less of Y, which is resulting in he is saving more and more money. So which is what is the component of the income effect, right? So he can either consume more of X because he got some additional income, so he can consume more of X, or he can consume less of X also. If this particular X is an inferior product, he will try to consume less of X and try to go for more of Y, though its price has gone down. Instead of consuming more of X, he'll try to consume less of it because because this is an inferior good, and because he is left with more and more money, he'll try to reduce this and try to consume more of Y. But if it is a normal good, with that additional money which he has saved, he can very well go with consuming more and more of X, because there is unspent income, saving money that has occurred because of the price decrease. And if it is a normal good, that income effect is positive, which means he can still consume more and more of X. Whereas if it is an inferior good, then he will not go for X, he will try to shift to the other one. So the substitution effect, if I see, it's always positive, right? Which means the consumption of the good X is increasing with a decrease in the price, and even the good, because of the additional saving, the person can consume even more of X. So substitution effect is positive, the income effect is also positive. But I can see a situation where the substitution effect is positive, but the income effect is negative, which means an inferior good. So I'll try to consume less of this X, but I'll try to start consuming more of Y with the additional money that I am able to generate. But it could be very much smaller compared to the substitution effect. Overall, it results in more of X only being consumed. But in some cases, okay, the substitution effect is positive, whereas the income effect could be negative, and in such a high magnitude that overall the consumption of X is going down compared to that of Y. So all these three situations can very well occur. Let's try to look at the graphical way on how each of them is typically coming up. Right, so let me first look at the first situation where the substitution effect and a positive income effect are coming up. Okay, let me look at that. These are the typical. So let's say this is the affordable bundle to start with. This is the affordable bundle. Let me assume. So this could be the budget constraint which he is having. So this is the affordable bundle. Now X price has actually gone down. Because it has gone down, he'll try to consume more and more of X, and he'll try to reduce the consumption of Y. Earlier he was consuming this quantity. Now because of that substitution effect, he started consuming more quantity of X compared to Y. So the substitution effect has gone up to this extent. So he is able to save more money, right? He is able to save more money, which has resulted, in the curve being shifted a little bit, right? Which is resulting in the income curve coming more from this particular standpoint. Now, with this increased income, he can move towards a slightly higher consumption bundle. So I can now, with this extra income, he can try consuming something like this, which is resulting in more of X, consuming more and more of X because of the positive substitution effect, which is resulting in, from this layer of X, if the good X has come down, he started consuming more of this X because of the substitution effect, and with that additional income he started consuming even more of X. But in some cases, what could very well happen is, look at like this. Initially, let's say this is his budget line. Now now the good has gone down in price, so he started consuming more and more of this X, right? More and more of this X, resulting in, now this being the typical budget client, right? He is able to consume more and more of X. Now if he has to shift to a higher, because of the additional dollars whatever he had, now he wants to shift to the income for him is typically going up. Now if he wants to purchase more and more, shifting towards the highest utility curve, I could see initially he was able to purchase only this much quantity. After the substitution effect, he was able to purchase this much. Now because of the income effect, a negative income effect, so after the income effect, his purchase of the quantity X has come down from QS to QI. So here it's a negative income effect, but it is slightly lesser than the positive income effect that created earlier. So overall, it is resulting in an increase in the consumption of the good X. So the same way, probably if it is even more flatter like this could have resulted in a curve like this, which is resulting after the income effect, the quantity consumed could have come here, means the income effect is so much negative that that it has completely eaten away the positive substitution effect, overall resulting in the consumption of the good X completely falling down. So we really have to understand for that particular good, the substitution effect is coming out to be positive, but the income effect is affecting more and more in either in a positive way if it is a normal good, or it could affect in a negative way with a higher magnitude if it is a much inferior good, or a negative income effect with a absolute magnitude being smaller than the substitution effect, resulting in still an overall increase in the quantity consumed. And now we should also try to understand the differentiation between a normal good and an inferior good. We have already discussed earlier that when I look at the income elasticity of demand, percentage change in the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. If this is positive, we say that it is a normal good. If it is negative, we say it is inferior, because the more and more my salary is growing, my income is growing. If it is a normal good, I try to consume more of it. But if it is an inferior good, I feel that yes, why should I buy a low quality product? Why should I buy an inferior product? Now my standard of living has already gone up. Now my income levels have gone up. So I could very well prefer a better product, and I'll try to reduce the consumption of an inferior good. Now, within that inferior itself, we see another important category called given good, which is the one that is having the negative income effect of a price, and it decreases, completely outweighs the positive substitution effect, which means I try to decrease the consumption of the good X if its price has gone down. Price going down, I try to reduce the consumption of that particular product, because the income effect is very heavily negative, that it is completely outweighing or dominating the positive substitution effect, resulting in an overall negative quantity, which means reduction in the quantity compared to the earlier scenario. So whenever there is a price decrease for that particular good, the quantity demanded for that good will come down. It's not that the substitution effect is negative. Substitution effect is still positive there, but the income effect has gone so high negative that it has outweighed the positive substitution effect that got created in the process. But this given good has to be differentiated from another similar kind of a good called Veblen good. This Veblen good is actually not an inferior good, but it behaves the same way. If the price of it is typically gone up, the quantity demanded for it will go up. because it is generally perceived as a status symbol. The higher is the price, the higher is the value people associate to it. So it's a kind of high premier product, diamond. The higher the price of it, people feel that this is the highest quality product, so there is a demand for that kind of a product. The moment there is a reduction in the price, people feel that there is a compromise in the quality, so they may not be purchasing more of it. Those kind of goods where a premium is attached and the higher price results in higher demand for it can be categorized as Veblen goods. So they, if at all they have an increase in the price, people try to buy more and more of it. The moment the price falls, the consumption levels typically go down, because the common perception that a high price means better quality, status symbol. So that is what is attached to a Veblen good. So given good also behaves the same way. Price decrease, quantity demanded decreases. But Veblen, I look at it slightly from the other side. The price increase, the quantity demanded also increases. But of course, Veblen is not an inferior good by any means. So demand curves wise, we see that for these kind of goods, both for Giffen as well as Veblen, we see that they slope upwards. In the regular ones, the demand curve, we see that it is sloping downward, but at least for Giffen and Veblen, at least over some price range, I see that the demand curve will be sloping upwards along with the supply curve. So that's one important differentiation that we need to observe. So these are some of the important aspects with respect to the consumer demand that we really need to understand, right? Differentiate, understanding the utility function, then looking at the indifference curve, the budget constraint, the equilibrium from a consumer standpoint. How do I look at the substitution effect and the income effect? And how do I differentiate between the normal goods and the inferior goods, right?